Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Line, the NFL Super Bowl show. I'm John Cranton, joined by Paul Bovi and world champion handicapper Jim Feist. Going to take a look back at some of the conference championship action, as well as the upcoming Super Bowl lines and some of the value betting that may be out there. First, Jim, I know you're off a terrific weekend, including the top play in the NFL. Tell everybody what you have coming up for this weekend.
Well, John, hello, Paul. How you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Everybody out there, I won with my top play in the NFL, 49ers and Falcons over the total. Also had the 49ers in the game. The line on the game was anywhere between 1 and 5, but it actually closed either 3.5 or 4. So if you shop for numbers, which is very important, you can pick the winner. Probably on either side of that game, but most of the people could have won. More of the people could have won on the San Francisco side of it. I had a high roll. I had some prop bets. I was 3-1 on my prop bets, including a high roller on Aaron Hernandez over 6 receptions. He had 9. I have a huge high roller college basketball release going early Saturday. It's a $500 play online. You can get it for $25 with, it's a pay after you win. We don't do this very often. What you do is you call in, you register. It's $500, but you're not going to pay $500. If the game wins, you're going to pay $25. You call before 11 a.m. Pacific time. You only pay when it wins. Sign up early, 1-866-841-1655, and be sure, if you want daily free plays, to text WINNER, WINNER, to 313131. That number again to call for that pay after you win game is 1-866-841-1655. Back to you, John.
All right, and Dave Koken is under the weather this week. He will be back for next Thursday's NFL show. That's going to be a Super Bowl preview, looking at all the prop bets that are coming out. We're also going to have some free prop bets from our panel. Dave is off a 6-2 Saturday, had a terrific start, 5-0 start in the NHL, and he had 3 under-the-hat winners all last week in the 49ers, Citadel in college hoops, and the Chicago Blackhawks in hockey. He's got an under-the-hat weekend special. You can get 2 under-the-hat plays that are going Saturday for just $10 from Dave Koken, 1-866-896-1629. You can also get free text plays daily from him. Just text Koken, C-O-K-I-N, to 313131. Okay, Paula, we'll start with you. Let's look back at the conference championship games. I mean, you had 2 home teams that lost. Home field didn't mean anything. And then if you want to break it down to the physical teams, Baltimore and San Francisco against the more finesse Patriots and Falcons, well, it was a clean sweep for the physical teams. How did you assess the last weekend's games?
Well, I look at Atlanta, and they jump out to a 17-point lead, and I got the sense that they were going to dominate the game throughout, and all of a sudden, before you know it, San Francisco gets back in the game and wins outright. And to me, it was a shock because at no point during that game did I consider the 49ers to be shutting down the Falcons. In fact, Matt Ryan, 30 of 42 with phenomenal numbers, but Atlanta just imploded. They didn't get beat by the 49ers. They just beat themselves. As far as the Ravens and the Patriots go, it was just a matter of execution. New England moved the ball pretty handily up and down the field, but when they got down to the red zone, they stalled. The Ravens made the big plays at the right times, and they end up prevailing. And the Ravens seemed to be that team of destiny. They were on the brink of extinction against the Broncos, and here they are in the Super Bowl, and nobody thought they'd be here.
Well, actually, John, what was my prediction early in the year as to who's going to be in the Super Bowl, John?
You liked San Francisco right from back in August, and you also had the Ravens and the Patriots as winning their division. So, and the San Francisco was a team that you looked at back, and that was even before Colin Kaepernick took over too. You liked them.
The reason I liked the Ravens at that time was, of course, their division I felt was rather weak this particular year. But then they fall off the map when they had all those defensive injuries. And their defensive players are up in age. They've had some injuries. Ray Lewis will be retiring. By the way, he's playing pretty well right now, and even with that bad arm. But they kind of dropped off the map, and everybody stopped looking at them because their offense was in disarray. They had some very, very poor outings against some bad teams, Kansas City being one of them. And then they had that upset, that hiccup with the offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. That's a big move. And nobody really gave them a lot of credit. When they played the Colts at home. That was their only home game in the playoffs. The Colts had, if I'm not mistaken, 409 or 419 offensive yards. Only got 9 points. That you can either look at that and say the Colts offense was inefficient in the red zone, or you can say the Ravens defense was very efficient in the red zone. Probably a little bit of both. Then they go to Denver, which is a very tough place to play anyway, and it was freezing, terrible weather. They gave up a lot of points there. Should have lost the game. The Denver bonehead defensive play let them back in the game when it was really over. And then, of course, Peyton Manning made a big mistake, and they took advantage of that. I got to give them credit for being resilient. They go to New England, and as Paul said, they gave up a ton of yards. Brady moved up and down the field on them first half. New England probably should have been ahead more than they were. But it goes back to the same situation they had against the Colts, where the Colts had all that yardage, and they just didn't give up the points. So, you start to look at that and say, okay, well, this defense knows how to protect the end zone. And I guess that's the truth of it. Now they're going to play a pretty physical club. They haven't really played a physical team so far. I mean, this San Francisco team is very physical, as is Seattle, and as are the Ravens. So when it comes down to physicality, the physical teams have made it the farthest. That figures. Football is a physical game. And if you have a decent enough offense, and of course the Ravens do, and so do the 49ers, that's why we have them here. They got two good running teams. You got offensive and defensive lines that are extremely good. They protect the quarterback. They open up holes. They got wide receivers that can run short routes and deep routes, and the quarterbacks can hit them. They have big arms, and they're accurate with the short throws as well. A little bit of an unknown with Kaepernick because he's only been around 10 games, where Flacco's been around for about 10 years. So there's a lot of difference there in the way we can measure these guys, but I can't take anything away from the way Kaepernick has been playing. Game's going to be played in perfect conditions in a dome in New Orleans. That's a fast track, and a lot of games, there's a lot of scoring that goes, but that goes along with the Saints and the way they play also. So there's a lot to look at. I really haven't studied this matchup as much as I will, but I will tell you the approach that I'm going to take. I was telling John earlier, when I was 15 years old, I could run the 100-yard dash in under 10 seconds. Now I can run a 10-yard dash in under 100 seconds. That's a big difference. These teams are different than they were in preseason in September, October, and November. They're different. They play different. They got different chemistry right now. Their offensive and defenses are working more as a unit today than they were. That's what happens when you get to the Super Bowl. It's the teams that get it together, that gel at the right time, that win these things. And I think both of these teams are gelling at the right time. So what I'm going to look at is how are they playing now. I'm going to look at all the statistics. Rushing yards per carry, rushing yards total, long passes, short passes, efficiency by quarterbacks, red zone play. I'd say the red zone play is probably going to edge towards the Ravens at this point from what I just said. So that's how I'm going to approach the game. I think the coaching is, I don't know that you give anybody the coaching edge. I mean, you got two brothers that grew up in a household of football mentality, and I think they probably grew up with the same type of mentality. They're smart. They have good support. So I'm approaching it from the current standpoint. How did they play the last few games? And then the matchup. How are they going to be able to defend a quarterback? The Ravens going to be able to defend a quarterback that's not a statue. It's not going to drop back and stay one spot and just throw the ball, which is what they had with the last three guys they played. So that's going to be the key to my analysis of it. I really don't care about what happened 20 years ago or 15 years ago, Super Bowl trends and all that garbage. We're playing these teams this year, these guys, these coaches. That's how I'm looking at it.
Well, I can run
it's
100.
Interesting.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting because last Thanksgiving these two teams hooked up, and I believe it was something in the area of a 16-6 game. It was an ugly defensive battle, and as I recall, a very boring game. And the culture of these two teams have changed immensely. And part of that is with the insertion of Colin Kaepernick over Alex Smith. Alex Smith was a dink-and-doink quarterback who methodically went down the field. And give Harbaugh credit, because when he did bench him, he had 104 passer rating. So that's unprecedented. And mind you, it was because of a concussion initially, but then there was a decision to keep Colin Kaepernick in there. And Atlanta did a masterful job last week sealing the edges and preventing from Colin Kaepernick from just taking off and scampering as he did the prior week for 180 some odd yards. But with that, they basically let Frank Gore run up the middle, and Gore had a very productive game, and as did the tight end. So there's going to be some liabilities if the Ravens try to take away Kaepernick as the Falcons did, and I think they're going to struggle with that, because if you look at the Ravens' schedule, they had two games against teams with mobile quarterbacks, and in the latter game, RG3 got hurt. Kirk Cousins came in, performed well at that point. In the prior game, it was Michael Vick. In the second game of the season, I think Vick took off 10 times for 34 yards. I happen to think Colin Kaepernick at this point is a lot better of a runner than Michael Vick, and a lot better passer at this point too. But when you look at the Ravens, they did not take on a very formidable schedule this year. Now, granted, they have performed admirably in the playoffs, but look down that schedule. The Browns twice, and the Raiders, and when they did face the Steelers had backup quarterbacks in there. So you might want to discount those two games. I think the Ravens are going to have a hard time stopping that 49er multi-faceted offense now with Colin Kaepernick as a threat to take off at any time. So this shapes up to be a very interesting Super Bowl. It's funny, the line opened up 5.5, even 6 in some spots. Hey, it's touching 3.5 right now in certain places, and it's in free fall. Where it stops, I would imagine 3.5. But it's been interesting that the early support is on the Baltimore Ravens.
All right, well, before we get to our Twitter question of the week, which is going to have to do with statistics on the Super Bowl and matchups, let's get down with our man on the street, Jeff Sod of Las Vegas Sports Services. He has a free pick on a college basketball game coming up Saturday. Jeff?
Thanks, Dave. A free college play coming up. First, you can get 2 weeks of basketball for just $20, college and the NBA, as well as a Super Bowl slide-in total. Sign up today and get a high roll of basketball play from tonight as a bonus. All this for just $10. Call LVSS at 1-866-575-8916. Your free play is Saturday in college basketball out west, New Mexico at San Diego State. San Diego State is home, but it's been a tough stretch of late. Home from a 2-game road trip, and they've stumbled, losing to Arizona in their last home game to UNLV 82-75, allowing 51% shooting. San Diego State hadn't lost at home since a 77-67 defeat to New Mexico. That's February 15th. Well, here comes New Mexico again, a strong team with a great 1-2 punch of Kendall Williams and Alex Kirk, one of the top teams in the Mountain West in rebounding, defense, and free throws. A team that is 3-0 straight up and against the spread against top 25 teams, beating UConn, number 8 Cincinnati, and UNLV. Play New Mexico. Once again, you get 2 weeks of basketball for just $20, college and the NBA, as well as a Super Bowl side and total. Sign up today, get a high roller basketball play tonight as a bonus. All this for just $10. Call 1-866-575-8916.
All right, thanks, Jeff, and make sure you grab Jeff's offer, too, as he's been on a nice run. Gentlemen, our question of the week, we have Twitter question of the week. You can Twitter us at Jim Feist Sports or at Facebook at Proline TV. Comes from Jack Carter of Tampa, Florida. He's asking you, what stat do you weigh the most when assessing Super Bowl matchup, such as run defense, passing offense, quarterback rating, or balanced offenses? Gentlemen?
Go ahead, Paul.
I look at definitely strength versus weakness. So if one team, let's say, has a weakness versus the run, and the other team has a very potent running offense, that's certainly going to weigh in. But to me, I look at which team is peaking at this particular time, because sometimes you can throw out a lot of what happened in the past, because what counts is who's performing at a high level right now. You take the Giants last year, who didn't even look like at one point they were going to make the playoffs, and the year prior you had the Green Bay Packers, who are almost on the out looking in, and both those teams managed to break through, get to the playoffs, and win Super Bowls. And right now you have to look at which team is performing at the highest possible level, exceeding expectations, playing outside their limitations or perceived limitations. And in some cases, both teams are. But those are some of the things that I really am going to weigh in on as I handicap this game.
I take a look at quarterbacks first, and in this case, it's kind of a wash. They're both playing at a high level, and I would both call them above average. Second thing would be defense, and there does seem to be, I see a significant defense. Baltimore has had injuries and age and struggled much of the year against the run and the pass, have been giving up a lot of yards in the playoffs despite not a lot of points. And then San Francisco, fourth against the run, fourth against the pass. You get 9 Pro Bowlers total on the 49ers, 6 of them on that defense. So I think they have a significant edge in defense in this one. Jim, what do you see?
When you look at the year-to-date numbers, I'll go back to what I said before. When you look at the year-to-date numbers, I think you really throw yourself off. I don't think it has anything to do with the teams we're looking at today. Throughout the year, they start in the preseason, and throughout the year, the coaching staffs and the players change their attitude, they change their schemes, injuries take place, backup players come in. And when you look at the overall stats, San Francisco has the better defense. They give up 18 points a game. Baltimore gives up 21 points a game. That's the entire season, not preseason, but the entire regular season and playoffs. When it comes to rushing the ball, San Francisco's second in the league, Baltimore's 10th. 165 yards per game versus 124 yards per game. Defense against the run. San Francisco, third in the league, 94 yards per game. Baltimore, 19th in the league, which is less than middle, at 123. So when you look at the turnover ratio, they're about equal. Plus 14 for Baltimore, plus 11 for San Francisco. But like I said, these teams have nothing to do. Baltimore has nothing to do with the team that played Cincinnati, Philadelphia, New England, Cleveland, Kansas City back in September. They're not the same ball club. They don't have the same philosophies. They've changed. Their schemes have changed. Their offensive and defensive coordinators, who I think are totally undervalued when it comes to analysis. It's these guys, not the head coaches, It's the offensive and defensive coordinators that make the adjustments. They're hands-on with those squads that make the adjustments as to what's going to go on in the next game. The head coach, like a leader, a CEO of a company, he delegates. Now, he may have some input here and there. And in some teams, of course, we know owners don't delegate to anybody. And we'll mention about those people down in Dallas later if we get to that. But when you look at San Francisco lately, even though their defense has been very, very good throughout the year, they want to stretch with giving up 0, 3, 6, 3, 7. But lately, they've given up 24, 31, 13, 42, 34. They're giving up a lot more points than the third-ranked team would be giving up. Something has happened where the other teams, see, these is where all the adjustments come in. They have figured out how to score against this club. Now, they used to get a lot of sacks. They're not sacking the quarterback anymore, which is why the quarterbacks have been able to get more downfield throws, getting more time in the pocket without getting harassed. And if you give guys like Flacco time, they're going to hurt you. So that's all we got to look at here. Look at what they're doing currently and see if there's, logically in your mind, is there something that these teams can do to affect the outcome of the next game. But right now, these teams are who they are today, not who they were in September and October.
And that's a great point because along the lines of what I had said, San Francisco, if you look back at those last 5 games, I mean, in arguably a very important game against Seattle where they could have wrapped up the division, Seattle just ran roughshod over them. And the week prior, they took a huge lead over the New England Patriots, and the Patriots came back, scored 4 touchdowns in the span of 15 minutes to pull right back in the game. And then you look at the Green Bay game. They didn't really stop the Packers. They put pressure on Aaron Rodgers. And then this past week against Atlanta, as I mentioned early in the show, they did not stop the Falcons. The Falcons stopped themselves, and that's borne out by the numbers that Matt Ryan produced. So this San Francisco team is clearly much a different ball club than they were early in the year, and I think they benefited by, as you mentioned before, Jim, they're in a very weak division. So sometimes when you're in that weak division, you can kind of skew the numbers in your favor, especially given the offensive futility of some of those teams.
I'd like to add something to that, Paul. Your excellent point. Let's take a look at rushing the ball, and specifically defense against the rush. The one thing that San Francisco has done all year long is they've been very difficult to run on, and that has not changed that much. For the most part, there's only 2 games in, I think, the last 10, I think it's 10, let me see here, it might be 9, that they've given up over 100 yards rushing. That's a real critical thing, because if you're not giving up rushing yards, that means you're putting a lot of pressure on the other team to throw the ball and gain the yardage by passing. Now, that opens up the possibility of getting sacks. This is the part that I don't quite understand. Even though they're not giving up a lot of rushing yards, only twice have been over 100 yards in like 10 games, their sack numbers have gone way down. And I know their defensive lineman, Smith, was hurt, and maybe he's not playing as effectively as he was. The linebacker, Aldon Smith, was getting a lot of those sacks, but he's not any longer. Now, it could be the combination of the defensive lineman being hurt, not being playing up to snuff, that Aldon Smith isn't getting free enough to get those sacks. But that is a critical element, I feel, here, as to why they're giving up so many points. Because it's not happening on the rushing part. The rushing part of their defense has stayed strong since day one.
Yeah, it's a good point. And as you know, as I look at their schedule, They had the Bears, and Cutler wasn't in for that one. They had the benefit of playing the New York Jets, and that's going to help anyone's average. They shut out the Jets in New York, as I recall, and that just started Mark Sanchez's free fall. I remember when they played New Orleans, and New Orleans had several issues on the offensive line. I remember we had talked about that game at length, Jim, and it resulted in a lot of pressure on Drew Brees. They played Buffalo at home. That was an impressive win. But I think when they ran up against or they faced off against good teams, they had their struggles defensively. And you got to give Joe Flacco a lot of credit. You know, Joe Flacco, I believe, 12 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions in 9 or 10 playoff games, 55% completion. But let's look at the last 4. I think we can make an argument that over the last 2 years, no quarterback has elevated his stock more than Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, the last 4 playoff games, dating back to that New England game that they lost last year, where there was a late field goal miss that would have tied the game and a pass dropped in the end zone, Joe Flacco has been lights out for this team. And he's been carrying the Ravens to some degree. And, you know, if the 49ers have defensive liabilities, Joe Flacco looks like the man that could take advantage. And let's look at what Joe Flacco has done and take it a step further. These games that he's been winning, they've been in extreme elements. New England, Denver, that was a sub-zero game, wind chill, as I recall. Now you're playing in perfect conditions. It's going to get a lot easier on Joe Flacco to complete those passes downfield, and I think he has some success.
And he's in a contract year too.
I can't disagree with that at all. Because Flacco's an excellent quarterback. You know, Ryan and Flacco came into the league at the same time, and I feel they both have blossomed. Matt Ryan didn't lose the game the other day. I mean, he played very well, and his wide receivers are excellent. Both these guys have really developed over the last few years, and they are at the top of the league. I'd say top 5 or 6 in the league right now. And Flacco has been, I think he's had 8 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions in the 3 games against the Colts, the Broncos, and the Patriots. That's exceptional.
Yeah, it
exceptional. Some of those balls were just amazing because they were rainbows. And you're waiting for the ball to come down 5 yards removed from the receiver, and they're dropping right in their arms. And you say, well, how does this guy do this? It's just incredible. But John made a good point, you know, and he's in a contract year, okay? And let's not overlook that. I guess there's a direct correlation between performance and contract years. Somehow that thing seems to work right into the mix.
You mean money matters?
Money talks. It is for Joe. It is for Mark. A couple of trends, totals trends, if you like to play totals in the Super Bowl. The Ravens, they're 4-1 under the total the last 5 playoff games, which is no surprising, as Paul mentioned, the colder elements plus the physical defense. But also the 49ers, they're on a 5-0 run over the total when they face a team with a winning record. Okay, let's wrap it up. Dave Koken will be back next Thursday, and if you like to play his Under the Hat releases, which were a perfect 3-0 last week, he's got an Under the Hat special on Saturday. You can get 2 Under the Hat plays in different sports from Dave, just $10 for both plays. 1-866-896-1629. Jim, I know you have a special pay after you win release going on Saturday. How can people get on board that?
Well, you write this number down and make the phone call as soon as you can, 1-866-841-1655. Pay after you win. It's a $500 release that you're only going to pay $25 for. You can go online and buy it for $500. That's fine as well. But this game will win. After it wins, you'll pay $25. Call before 11 a.m. Pacific time. You only pay when it wins. Make sure it's an early game on Saturday, 1-866-841-1655.
All right, be sure to tune in next Thursday. We have our pre-Super Bowl show again, and that's going to be focusing on totals. There are going to be prop bets. There are going to be hundreds of prop bets out there. We'll have analysis on them as well as some free prop bets for you. For Paul Bovi, Jim Feist, I'm John Cranton. We'll see you next week, and good luck, everyone.
Take care, guys.